Marshmallow needed a moment to accept that she had indeed awoken upon the same rusty old bridge where she had fallen asleep. It was as if the whole world had emerged from a long hibernation. She took in a long, deep breath of the fresh morning air, but it proved to be overwhelming, and she had to close the curtain and retreat back into the safe, familiar darkness of her cave. She felt better equipped to start figuring things out in a space muffled from the noise and the blinding sunlight that assaulted her senses. There was just no possible way that she was brave enough to face that chaos just yet, and certainly not without breakfast. In the corner of the cave was a large wooden crate labeled supplies. Marshmallow dove in. Someone had been thoughtful enough to fill it with everything that a hungry adventurer might need, and she was famished. At first it all looked so intriguing that she had to stop herself from opening up everything to try it all. Instead, she laid it out on the stone floor. There was porridges and jam and crackers, dandelion wine, and all kinds of colorful teas and pickled preserves. There was a bright yellow teapot, a lantern, a stove, and some matches, along with various other utensils. The choices made Marshmallow feel giddy, or perhaps that was just the hunger. After some serious deliberation, she decided to open up some wild strawberry jam, mainly because she liked the cute little jar and the bright, colorful goo it held inside, but also because she didn't want to try anything that needed to be cooked on the little stove just yet. She was nervous about starting any fires. But the jam proved to be an excellent choice. It was sweet and messy and delicious. As the spring breeze wafted in through the doorway, Marshmallow finally felt brave enough to venture outside to eat her breakfast. She sat in the warm sunshine, on top of the rusted metal tunnel. The river churned underneath her dangling feet, and she was able to get a better view of the goings-on along the riverbanks below. She started to relax and really observe her surroundings, and that is when she noticed the field mice. They were energetic creatures, and they'd have to be to build up a little society on what would have otherwise been wasteland. They used the river as a highway, working tirelessly loading and unloading crates on colorful steam-powered boats to be taken off to some mysterious destination upriver. It seemed to Marshmallow that they must be making up for lost time in winter, when the water was all dried up. She wondered if the mice hibernated too. She hadn't seen any sign of them on her muddy journey towards the bridge, although she likely wouldn't have known what to look for. She wondered where they were going and what they had in their own crates. Perhaps it was more strawberry jam. She wondered if she could ask them, but decided against approaching them. They seemed so busy and focused. She couldn't bear to think of getting in anyone's way. She just watched their comings and goings, watched them take more crates away in bug-drawn wagons, disappearing into the vast flowering fields. The more she saw of this busy, colorful world, the more curious she became. If she couldn't have her many questions answered, Marshmallow was determined to learn about her surroundings through her own investigative efforts. She needed to learn about these mice and their lives. The first step, she reasoned, now properly clear-headed and energized by her sugary meal, was to get a better view of things. The tunnel had been a decent vantage point, but there was still more bridge above her, so she started climbing. Marshmallow pulled herself up with relative ease, up a wooden ladder, her feet touching grass for the very first time. It was soft, much nicer than mud. She was so very high up, higher still when she hoisted herself up a metal guardrail, which was nearly as rusted as the tunnel below, and looked out in wonder at the world that stretched beyond. The river snaked through a dense blanket of bright yellow flowers, disappearing in either direction into a dark, distant tree line that sat on the horizon. Marshmallow was dismayed that she could not see where it went after that. Another tantalizing little mystery. How long would it take, she wondered, to walk to the end of the world? But there was more to the top of the old bridge than just a panoramic view. Underneath the broad leaves of some giant unknown plant were two small buildings. One was a dome made from what appeared to be red clay, and the other was a little yellow cafe full of coffee and treats. Despite the delicious smells wafting from it, Marshmallow was determined not to bother any of the mice, and opted to wander into the clay dome rather than distract the barista from her work. She made her way cautiously inside, not entirely sure she was even supposed to be there. Upon passing the doorway, she gasped. Everywhere she looked was full of treasure. The shop was filled to the brim. Baskets were stacked, and shelves were packed with strange, colorful items, both practical and decorative. Marshmallow had no clue as to what any of it would be for, but she wanted it all. She noted that having a roof over her head made it so much easier to focus on all of the wonders that surrounded her. Outside had no lid to it, and everything was so overwhelming that she felt as though she was going to float away, to be swallowed up by the endless open space. Inside the shop, she managed to relax her shoulders, distracted by 1,000 trinkets. Lost in her observations, Marshmallow didn't notice that there was a field mouse standing behind the counter watching her. With a warm smile, the mouse introduced herself as Marigold. Marshmallow was a little nervous at first, but Marigold knew right away that the little green creature was not a local. In fact, news had spread fast around the dandelion fields that there was someone new living inside the bridge. Nothing stayed secret among the field mice for long. Marshmallow was relieved that she didn't have to pretend that she knew what was going on, and the million questions that were building up inside of her from the time she arrived began to spill out. It was only later that night, laying in her little bed trying to sleep, was she embarrassed at her lack of social graces. At that moment, her curiosity overpowered her courtesy. Marigold proved to be an excellent source of information. Everyone who came through the dandelion fields passed through the trading post and cafe to trade goods and gossip. This shop was, besides the cafe, the only one for miles around. It was only open seasonally, after the spring thaw and until the frost, because the field mice hibernated all winter, warm inside their underground homes. In the long dark months, they were cut off from the wider world, but when the river returned, the mailman's boat came with it, and it was back to business. In fact, it had been the mailman who set up the little cave full of supplies where Marshmallow had taken up residence, just in case he or someone else got stranded. Marigold, noticing that her audience was losing focus, transfixed by a display of colorful buttons, explained that everything in the shop was available to own for the right trade. Local business was done largely through bartering. Apparently, the mud in the riverbank held many treasures for anyone with the time and initiative to find it, and the mice had little time to look. This was fantastic news. Marshmallow felt radiant with newfound purpose. She would be a treasure hunter. She was so excited to get started that she stopped listening to Marigold altogether, who was trying to caution her about not getting lost or hurt or trespassing on private property. But Marshmallow was now operating on pure impulse. She left the shop, climbed back down the bridge, and right into a random thicket of dandelions, not even looking for the path forward. From above, the yellow flowers had looked like a carpet, stretching on forever. But from the ground, the dandelions towered overhead, and the sun only came through in speckles, through gaps in the leaves. Sound, too, was muffled, the river getting quieter and quieter until there was no sound at all. It was here in the hushed darkness that Marshmallow got lost. The realization sank her enthusiasm like a stone. She thought about her warm blanket and the lovely wild strawberry jam waiting for her at home. Sorry that she hadn't properly thought through this little adventure. She wondered what time it was, and how long she had been wandering around. She tried to recall Marigold's practical warnings. She wondered if she would ever see her little cave again. She started to panic. Why had she ever left the safety of the bridge? Why hadn't she just stayed along the riverbank? What if she never made it back? The waves of fear were exhausting. and she climbed into a nearby clover patch before her legs gave out. It felt safe in the leafy enclosed space, and she felt protected. The clover smelled sweet, which was something nice to focus on, washing away the panic. A passing farmer, whose crops Marshmallow was currently hiding in, scurried over to offer some much-needed assistance. Of course, he was well aware of who she was. The field mice loved to talk, after all. Usually he had to wait until the harvest festival to meet outsiders, but here she was, right in his clover. This would be something interesting to tell his family at supper. He helped her out of her hiding place and assured her that she wasn't the first to get lost in the thick foliage of dandelions. He offered to give her a guided tour on the way back to the road, and she followed behind him awkwardly. The dandelions, it turned out, was the staple crop of the field mice. It was hugely important, a life source as bright and warm as the sun. Food, medicine, dyes. Most parts of these plants were hugely nutritious and terribly useful, and it grew everywhere. The field mice had enough food to last all year, and they exported it all over the world as well, allowing them to build up their own little corner of it. And build they did. Marshmallow remembered seeing tall metal structures rising up from the fields, now learning that they were windmills and smokestacks powering the farms. The field mice lived in subterranean farmhouses, clay structures burrowed safely underground, linked together by tunnels. New additions were added as families grew, but it was rare for a new farm to be built anymore. Much of the land was already spoken for. Families were already well established. The clay buildings were constructed and fired miles upriver by the toads, floated downriver on barges, and it took teams of potato bugs to dig them in. It was an event that required multiple families and multiple days to complete. The sheer scale of these homes left Marshmallow in awe, and they were decorated and cozy with no mud inside. The mice lived with their extended families, with more than enough space for everyone, but not for Marshmallow. She was gradually becoming aware that she was all alone in the world. The field mice were kind enough, but she doubted that come winter any of them would let her join them underground, nor would she feel comfortable asking. Seeing how they lived made her want to build up a little life of her own. Maybe she too could come to be a small part of this community. It was clear that she had much to learn about the world around her. She felt terribly ignorant and didn't want to be left behind for another moment. Marshmallow had taken some mental notes about the farm and noticed that the mice loved decorating, but perhaps were a little too busy to find treasures for themselves. This reaffirmed her desire to become a treasure hunter, that there was a need for it. But next time, she would do some planning and preparation. So she set to work becoming a student of her environment. And the more she learned, the less she felt afraid of everything around her, even of all the unknown hazards. One important thing she noticed about the field mice was that they loved to give advice, especially the older ones. They taught her the names of the plants that flourished in the dandelion fields, and that they were all useful in their own unique ways. The dandelion, of course, was the star of the show, but there was also wild strawberry, the source of her beloved jam and a staple in cakes and sweets, reeds for baskets and boats and crayfish traps, yellow wood sorrel, which was also known as fairy pickles, for preserves and orange dye, wild plantain for medicine and for milling into flour, clover for tea and perfume, and burdock, which was the big leafy plant on the top of the bridge with nutritious and medicinal roots, and it was a well-known ingredient in a popular health tonic. The field mice worked from sunup to sundown, though with plenty of rest and gossip in between. They always enjoyed and appreciated the sunlight and fresh air as they prepared for the long winter without it, though they were still plenty comfortable by candlelight. But winter was far from Marshmallow's mind. She loved nothing better than discovering things or learning about something new that she could eat. The field mice could sense this, and in their hearts and their dinner tables, they worried about the little green stranger and her ability to survive. Oblivious to this, she developed a daily routine of exploring and treasure hunting, though now she stuck to the roads and riverbanks. She had a knack for finding treasures, an eye for it, the mice said. As the weather warmed, she enjoyed looking for trinkets in the river best of all. The water was cool, and it was much easier to stay out of everyone's way, and she liked to watch the boats go by. Over time, she had actually become quite a fixture at the trading post, and Marigold was always quite impressed at the things she brought in. Sometimes Marshmallow would keep the things she found, especially if they were particularly shiny or sparkly. She wanted to fill her space up with beautiful things, so that it felt more like the trading post, less empty. Maybe she could open up her own little shop for the winter, should anyone passing through need a button or an empty jar. Marshmallow's days had become pleasant. She could just wander around dreamily, exchanging shiny things for delicious treats at the cafe on top of the bridge. Her favorite were the fresh donuts with violet sprinkles and the pink clover lattes, which she enjoyed underneath the shade of the giant burdock plant. She had even come to love the rainy days. She was no longer afraid of being washed away. Instead, she took these days off to recharge, lazily listening to the droplets fall onto the river. Her work may not have been nearly as laborious as the field mice, but through her efforts, Marshmallow felt at home, as though she had a place and a purpose. She had no future plans. Life was so peaceful. But still, she couldn't help but look out from her place on the bridge and wonder about the faraway places where the river flowed beyond the horizon.